All right, coming in at number 13 on our Locked On Senators NHL draft rankings for 2023, it's our second Swede, our second defenseman. It's Axel Sandin Pellikka.
This defenseman is very different than our first defenseman in David Reinbacher, Ross. I would go as far to say the complete opposite of David Reinbacher here, but that's not to say it's a bad thing because there are so many good things that Axel Sandin Pellikka does well. And watching highlights of him, Ross, the first thing I noticed is this kid is just so smooth and shifty. Like he excels at carrying the puck up the ice and entering the offensive zone. And he's one of those defensemen. I like using the analogy of a point guard in basketball. Like no matter what happens, you hand the ball off to him and he starts to play. Teammates are glad to defer to doing that. And no matter who scoops up the loose puck or whatever, give it to Sandin Pellikka. Let him start everything. And you see the success that he has in transition, and you can understand why that's their mindset.
And not only that, for his size, I saw him throw a few huge hits.
Yeah?
Yeah, man, a couple of them, especially internationally. I saw it, and you don't really expect it from. It's not his game, but the fact that he has a little bit of that really gets me fired up. When you look at Axel Sandin Pellikka, he's a guy who's 5'11", 176 pounds. He played primarily with Skellefteå in the J20 league, but he also played 22 games at the SHL level. Because of the limited time on ice, we decided to use his stats from the J20, and he's probably glad we did because as a defenseman, he had 16 goals and 20 assists in 31 games. That's 36 points, 64 penalty minutes, and then internationally, he was outstanding. He played top 4 at the World Juniors for Team Sweden. That's the under 20s. And then at the under 18s at the end of the year, he was named the top defenseman in the tournament because he had 11 points in 7 games. Pilsy, I think people get the hint here that this guy is an offensive point producer that you can visualize seeing on a power play unit one day in the National Hockey League. He's ranked as high as 5th, Pilsy, with Craig Button. Why don't you take us through the rest of our rankings there for our listeners?
Absolutely. So Bob McKenzie did not have him ranked, but keep in mind, Bob McKenzie just did a top 12. Craig Button had him at 5th. Corey Pronman all the way at 22. So Ross, that's the third time we've kind of raised our eyebrows at Corey Pronman having guys very low. So that's interesting to note. Scott Wheeler at 16. Rachel Doherty had him at 7. Chris Peters at 16. Elite Prospects at 15. And an average rank of 14.6. So I feel like in the mid-teens is a fair spot to put Axel Sandin Pellikka.
Do you think he's the kind of defenseman, though, that a team, if they like him, we've only profiled one defenseman. We're at 13th in terms of our average rankings, where if a team wants a defenseman, they really like him, they might take him in the top 10.
I'm not so convinced top 10, but you never know. Like, I do think that if a team is looking for a defenseman and Reinbacher goes, you could see a quick trade up and they just say, we don't care what we're giving up. We need this guy.
Hey, the last time a defenseman didn't go in the top 5 was 2003. We mentioned that when we talked about Reinbacher. Well, guess what? Defenseman went 7, 8, 9. So it's almost like when one goes off the board, it's like, okay, time to go get our defenseman.
Yep, absolutely. And we've seen that with goalies in the past in drafts too, right? The first top goalie goes and then teams trade up and it's like 4 goalies in a row. So we've seen that type of behavior before at the draft. And Ross, like, the thing that I like about Sandin Pellikka so much is he's so good at carrying the puck into the zone, but he already has a plan for what he's going to do with it. Some defensemen, they just speed into the zone and then they don't know what they're going to do with it. And then they're in the corner and there's 2 opposing players just forcing them in the corner. And then they just try to do a risky pass and turn it over. And then it's like, well, who cares if you brought it into the zone if you just turn it over and now you're going to be the last man back because you're so deep into the zone, right? That's not necessarily a good thing. So what Sandin Pellikka does that I like is he can, before he enters the zone, it seems like he's already decided if he has the room and space to keep going and keep skating and drive towards the net, or if he needs to slow up and hit a trailing player with the pass so they can do it. And I find that very valuable. And the thing is, he's able to do that because he has such slick hands. You have to respect the ability that he can just weave through any defenders. And he's even so good with with his hands, Ross, that he's often used. I saw multiple highlights of him used in the shootout, and he's not just a defenseman going in there trying to rip a clapper past a goalie or just try to beat a goalie with a nice wrist shot. He's pulling off insane moves and making goalies look silly in the shootout. So that's nice to have in your back pocket, a little defenseman shootout specialist.
Pilsy, this player comparable might not land for Sens fans or fans of, the Arizona Coyotes or Chicago Blackhawks who didn't see the version that we saw of Magic number 7. But I see this Skellefteå jersey flying around the ice. I get shades of David Rundblad from his.
That's not where I thought you were going with this.
The right shot, just weaving through everybody, just making it look so easy. It's just, and if you haven't seen that YouTube video, Magic number 7, David Rundblad might be the best mixtape in NHL history. It is so ridiculous. Like Linus Omark type things where it didn't really work out in the NHL, but you look at what they did in Europe, it's crazy. I don't know if he's still going to have that same issue. I see him being definitely an NHLer, but I worry he could almost be like, I don't know, a third pair guy that plays on the top power play, like kind of just an offensive guy who plays 14 minutes a night, but 6 of those are on the power play. You know what I mean? And he's effective in that role, but I just don't know if that's the type of defenseman, especially in this deep draft, that you want to spend a top 10 pick on. I like the player. He'd probably be like a 4-star guy for me overall, but he to me is the perfect, like if you get him 15 or later, you're laughing. If you reach up, I'm like, did you leave a little value on the board?
Yeah, and that's fair. And it's all about what teams want, right? Like if you're just after a defenseman, I think your teams aren't going to be that worried about the assets they give up to trade to get him. But I agree. I don't see him as a top pair defenseman. I see him as a guy that's going to be a 4 or 5 defenseman on a team and play some power play time and maybe, like I mentioned, be a shootout specialist. Because the thing is, he's really not a great defender away from the puck. Like he has a tough time boxing out opponents. I don't want to say he seems disinterested, but this is a player that like there's two players here. There's Axel Sandin Pellikka when he has the puck, and Axel Sandin Pellikka when he doesn't have the puck. And they're two very different players, in my opinion.
And as Corey Pronman says, his defense will be his main question at the NHL level, but I do think he plays hard enough to be a top 4 defenseman. Meanwhile, Chris Peters says with his lack of size and not as much of a dynamic skill set, which I kind of disagree with, there are definitely real questions about his ability to play significant minutes at the NHL level. That being said, he's among the best puck-moving defensemen in this class with exceptional vision and passing ability. So it is a bit of a wide scope when it comes to Axel Sandin Pellikka, but I do think that he's going to be a guy who, for at least next year when he's still overseas, you're going to be like, oh, wow, his highlight reel's showing up every once in a while. He's going to be sick at the World Juniors, that sort of thing. So I could see him being a big riser. He's kind of risen from the start of the year to where he is now. So when I look at kind of what he could be, it's that elite mobility that's going to allow him to do just that. So Axel Sandin Pellikka comes in at number 13 for us.
I have one question to wrap this discussion up. And this is a mock draft style question, not a rankings question. Do you anticipate Axel Sandin Pellikka could be selected before David Reinbacher?
No.
No, me neither. But I think there's some teams, and as we saw from the rankings, like Craig Button, the difference between, I'm going to try to find it here, unless you have it handy, Ross, the rankings. But I think he has Sandin Pellikka at 5 and Reinbacher all the way at 24.
Correct.
So there are people that have that mindset that there's a big separation between these, and some of them lean towards Sandin Pellikka.
Craig Button even has Tom Willander at number 8. So he doesn't even have David Reinbacher as his second best defenseman in this draft.
So it'll be interesting to see if other teams follow suit. But I'm of the mindset, mock draft style, Reinbacher will be selected before any other defenseman in this draft.
For more Locked On Senators draft coverage, head to our YouTube page where they will all live forever.